Hi guys! Welcome to your last lesson in this whole Environmental Systems and Societies course. Congratulations on getting all the way to the end. Today we are going to look over the topic of solid domestic waste and what the production of solid domestic waste means for us as individuals and as a human society. We're going to talk a little bit about how solid domestic waste is defined, how it's produced, and then some things that we can do as a society to manage and be mindful about solid domestic waste production. I think it's a really relevant and important way to end the course, so let's get started. The first thing that we need to do is to define solid domestic waste. So this is basically just our trash. You can classify it into biodegradable, recyclable, electronic waste, hazardous waste, toxic waste, medical products, inert things like concrete, and mixed, which is two of these categories together. So things like TerraPak containers that have recyclable parts and non-recyclable parts. And we make a lot of trash. I'm going to share some information from the United Nations, a report on trash production in the world. And you can see the waste generation per capita per day, current estimates, and there's a low boundary and an upper boundary measured here. And then the average is taken, and that's sort of the most fair way that you can do this. These Middle Eastern countries, represented by MENA, you can see the upper boundary for production there is very, very high. The same with Latin America and the Caribbean, and then also with Southeast Asia. These are our three highest levels of upper boundary production. This OECD, these countries are sort of like the United States and the European Union. They're not quite as bad. And a lot of these, the low boundary is much lower than the high boundary. So the averages come out to be the ECA, the LAC, and the MENA are all three averaged at 1.1. And the ECA is East and Central Asia, so that's like sort of China, basically. These countries, since the difference isn't as significant between the low boundary and the high boundary, like this is the place where the low boundary is the highest, the average here is actually the highest. So it's likely that these countries, the United States, the European Union, actually do produce a lot of trash. And the same report made some predictions for the year 2025. So in looking at that, you have the projections ranging from numbers in the millions to numbers in the hundreds of thousands. All of these projections are waste generation in kilograms. This is per capita per day, and this is in tons per day for the whole country. So I want to move this just a little bit so we can see the actual total calculation. This is more than 6 million tons per day of trash for the world population in 2025. 2025 is not that far away, and it is becoming a desperate question. What are we going to do with all of this trash? I mean, it's a phenomenal amount of waste that we're producing. And we are going to talk a little bit now about how we manage those trash calculations. So in managing solid domestic waste, it's really the same old thing that you've always heard. You reduce, you reuse, and you recycle. In terms of reductions, these are absolute reductions, things that bring down the overall amount of trash that is produced in the world. You buy quality products, so you don't buy things that you're going to have to replace very often. You decrease packaging because a lot of the waste in the world is packaging waste. Peanuts, plastic, cardboard, boxes, all of those things that package our products. And then also avoid imports because that reduces the waste that's associated with transport, and also the fossil fuel usage that's associated with transport. When you talk about reusing, you can return bottles and packaging to be repurposed into something else, like Patagonia has this big campaign about how they can make fleece out of recycled plastics. That's great. Now you're starting to see a lot of phone covers made out of plastic that has been recycled from the oceans. That's great too. You can also compost and turn organic waste into soil, which is a wonderful reuse of organic waste. And then, of course, you can recycle. So when you're talking about recycling, you're giving food waste to animals. You're giving it a second life in its current state. You can recycle plastics and glasses and papers into new plastics and glasses and papers. So you're not repurposing there, but you're recycling so they can be used again. And then you can remanufacture things. When you look at disposing solid waste, those are a little bit different. So we're not talking about just managing it in terms of like what we're going to do with it, the stuff that really needs to be disposed, that can't be reduced or reused or recycled. There's two major ways that we get rid of that. One is throwing it in a hole, and the other one is burning it. Both of those methods have benefits and drawbacks. There's also a small amount of waste that we can do anaerobic digestion or composting on. This is only organic matter, so it's not practical for most items. The big choice is between landfills or incinerators. And as we're looking at the volume of trash that we're starting to produce, landfills might not be useful for that much longer. There's already sort of a proliferation of landfills in the world, and we don't have endless amounts of space to put our trash in. So incineration is becoming more common. Unfortunately, this can release toxic substances into the atmosphere. So there's really no great answer for what to do with the trash that we can't reduce, reuse, or recycle, which is why the managing of solid domestic waste back up here is so important. And like any problem of pollution, when we look at the management of solid domestic waste, we break it up into 3 levels. The first and the best is dealing with the human activity producing the pollutant. So we want to alter that activity and reduce waste. The second is dealing with the release of pollutants into the environment. So we can control the release through laws and through technology, things like fining people for producing too much trash. That's great. And the third is dealing with the impact of the pollutant on the ecosystem. So having to clean up old landfill sites, for example, is how we deal with the impact of the pollutant on the ecosystem. When you look at resource use and trash production, there's sort of 2 guiding principles that you can use. Currently, we are stuck in a linear economy where we buy something, we use it, and we throw it away. But it's better if you can create a circular economy where you buy something, you use it, and then instead of throwing it away, you recycle the materials so that you can use them to create something that can, again, be purchased and put through this loop. You don't create as much waste here, and it's actually very beneficial for businesses because you're not paying as much for raw materials. So this idea of the circular economy is getting a lot of traction in resource management circles now, and it's really important to consider how you can use waste products to produce new goods that people will buy. Because I think something that has been made relatively clear is people are not willing to stop buying stuff. We live in a capitalistic world, and people love shopping. When you consider the deep-seated love that people have for shopping and having things, you can look at their ecological footprint. And when you talk about an ecological footprint, you're looking at a model to measure resource use. Resources are things like the amount of carbon you use, the amount of clean air that you use, the amount of land, clean water, and food that you use in your life. You can look at this for individuals, or you can look at it for whole countries. Measuring an ecological footprint is important because it allows you to get a grasp on where your resource use is actually coming from, and then trying to manage that resource use gets a little bit easier. So your homework for this lesson is to finish the textbook. If you're following along, pages 381 to 399 is the last 2 sections of the textbook. Really, the only new information introduced in that very last section is the concept of absolute reduction and ecological footprint, which we actually went over already in chapter 1. And then review all of this course material, and when you are ready, go to the paper 1 and paper 2 assignments. You have a whole uniquely created case study exam and short answer and long response exam waiting for you, and I'm excited to go over them with you after you have completed them. See you there.